Hello, I'm Todd Phillips, the editor of Canadian Auto Dealer. We're joined here today by Steve Clelland. He's the Vice President of OEM Relationships with IA Dealer Services. Steve, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me very much, Todd.
Well, today we're going to talk about a topic that's on a lot of people's minds, auto theft, and more specifically, how this is impacting dealers and their ability to get things like garage insurance, protect their own inventory, protect their consumers' vehicles as well. So it's a complicated equation to get it right. We'll talk about the technology in a second, but Steve, there's been some progress recently between national auto summits and police holding auto summits on it. What are you seeing in terms of this, the mood, if you will, of the appetite, certainly among the police enforcement community and governments and other bodies that have been lobbying for this to actually really tackle this issue?
I think it's very helpful for the bigger problem that everybody's at the table together discussing the breadth and scope of the problem. And I kind of liken it to an iceberg. On the surface, it looks pretty manageable, but when you get under the water, it's a big problem with multifaceted contributors to how sophisticated the network is and how sophisticated the solution has to be as a result. Because everyone who this touches, from law enforcement to port authorities to port unions to insurance companies, and not just consumer insurance companies, but of course, garage insurance policies will have to be on the same page because not all solutions are the same. And I think the two lanes that the conversation's been divided into is prevention, which there's no absolute solution for yet. The manufacturers are trying, and then recovery, which even as little as a couple of years ago was a foreign concept. How are we getting these vehicles back? So it's a very complex problem, obviously, in the fact that the prevention, the police authorities and the insurance companies together discussing this, but I think they've realized how complex this problem actually is.
Well, I know, I mean, the stats are alarming. A vehicle stolen every 5 minutes in Canada, I guess, is the number that the Insurance Bureau of Canada has out there. And also they're paying out, I think in 2022, $1.2 billion in claims. And if insurance companies are paying that, they're not going to allow that forever without impacting both consumers and certainly dealers. So we're in a situation, though, in that mix where, you mentioned vehicle theft prevention. That's only going so far with the really rapid rise in things like carjackings and home invasions. We've all heard horror stories, in the community about thieves not even waiting to sort of crack the OEM code in terms of how to steal the vehicles using other technology. So it's getting more violent, more brazen. So it does pivot us to the conversation about vehicle recovery and how you can prevent and retrieve these assets once stolen. So in that landscape, it's complex for dealers. They're trying to figure out, which technology do I bank on, which one makes sense. So and so maybe tell us a bit about from IA Dealer Services perspective, like you've got, ape technology that you've been using for a while. Tell us a bit about that and how that works.
Yeah, and we looked at a number of solutions. We've been looking at vehicle location and tracking from the consumer's perspective, but years prior to that, from asset and inventory management for the manufacturers who were sharing port facilities and the number of vehicles that just basically got lost. So for the last 7 or 8 years, the technology's changed quite rapidly, but we understood very quickly that it's not even a question of capacity or ability to locate the vehicle. It's the ability to bring all of the stakeholders together, because the police are not going to engage with an individual, for example, who has an Apple AirTag on his vehicle, say, oh, please go find it. I know where it is. There is a whole number of issues between the vehicle being stolen and then the attempt to recover it, where there has to be legal compliance from a search warrant perspective. As we know, most of the vehicles end up going to the port. So there's so many stakeholders involved and so many layers of government to get around, or not necessarily to get around, but to get on the same page, to have that ability, because everyone knows the vehicles aren't being repatriated locally. They're being put in a shipping container, shipped overseas. It's a very complex network. And so is the theft ring, as well as the structure within that as well, because they're always a step ahead for the most part. So we looked at what would be the most effective technology that would get the police involved where they would feel comfortable. We have a relationship with Crime Stoppers, who have a very extensive relationship here in Canada with the police departments to get them to take our recovery technology seriously. There's also the ability for that product to be covert. We don't want to tell consumers and everybody, hey, this vehicle has a device in it that'll help track it, because that basically starts the search effort on behalf of the thieves to say, okay, if this has a device, I'm going to remove it because I want this asset. So we've spent a great deal of time on the recovery side. There's really no one clean preventative tool. There's a lot of talk about ignition interrupting systems, but there's also a significant risk to the consumer from their vehicle warranty with those devices because they're not approved by the OEM. There should no point should there be wiring cut in a vehicle to try and prevent theft, because that creates another problem itself. So really the bigger problem here is there's no standard solution for theft recovery or theft prevention. So everyone's looking for an easy and quick solution, which there isn't one. But also that brings in a lot of solutions that aren't fully flushed out or don't have a relationship with the police or the recovery networks or CSIS or the border services or even the unions for that matter. It's a very complex issue. So we've tried to keep a low key on our solution necessarily, but getting approval of the insurance companies, starting with the garage insurance providers, because there's a significant cost or even a risk of not getting insurance for dealers here. So we do have approval from all of the garage insurance providers in Canada. The personal lines insurance is a bit different because there are some technologies that were first to post that the insurance companies approve, but they're somewhat reluctant to look at better technologies or more flushed out technology. So there needs to be some level of standardization to provide the consumers with peace of mind for what they're spending money for, that it can actually do what it says it's going to do. It's one thing to get an insurance discount or to get a rebate or to get the premium charge reversed if the technology doesn't do its job, because you need to get the asset back. So it's still in its infancy. I think the fact that the authorities, the insurance companies, the federal government, provincial governments are getting together to look for a solution, it should provide some level of standardization for the consumers in the end. But for every problem that science solves, it creates 10 new problems, and the thieves are very, very intelligent. So having a fixed solution in a vehicle from the manufacturer doesn't necessarily solve the problem, because as soon as the thieves discover where that fixed location device is, they'll simply remove it every time. They communicate faster than the manufacturers can come up with a solution.
So this does speak to the need really to have more standardizations throughout the industry to allow other players, other technologies to come with more solutions other than just, if you will, an entrenched provider, whoever that might be, or just a one solution. Because as the technology keeps evolving, the thieves get smarter. There may be best of breed providers that are being developed elsewhere that need to come to the market. But I guess for a dealer looking at it, they're like, where do I go? All these technologies kind of sound the same. They offer the same sort of problems. So I guess what's missing, and what I'm hearing from you, is some sort of standardization or criteria for the insurance companies, dealers, consumers to kind of level the playing field and let someone know kind of what the technology that they're going to have and how it is connected, if you will, to a broader ecosystem of law enforcement and everything else. That's missing right now. So it's fair to say it's pretty much just the Wild West in this vehicle recovery business.
Very much so, and though it's an oversimplification, but when the same insurance companies who are underwriting the car risk also underwrite home risk, and when home alarm systems were quite popular and discounts were applied for home alarm systems, again, I'm oversimplifying, but the standardization was just have a home alarm system. You could have anything. You could have an angry dog and you probably would have qualified for a discount. Now, the standard is that you need to have a monitored home alarm system to achieve that discount. So again, that's very linear and much more simple, but there has been some standardization of that. So it's ADT, it's TELUS, it's Rogers. They all have a monitored system, and those criteria continue to evolve, whereby the systems improve and there's some standardization. So everybody's in the market. We don't think for a millisecond that we would have the only solution. What we're asking the government to do and asking law enforcement to do and insurance companies is to look into those solutions to make sure that they do provide the ability of interaction with law enforcement to be able to safely recover the asset. So we are engaged with those discussions. We've attended all of the summits to make sure that we are being heard, and not from a premise of saying, hey, buy this product because it's better, but to at least establish some level of standardization so that there are multiple effective solutions for dealers. So far, the garage insurance policy issuers have been pretty restrictive on what they will approve. There is an approved product and for that purpose. The personal lines insurance companies are a bit different because they grab the first solution that came along and think, okay, we have the problem solved, not realizing that there is better healed technology out there available.
So I guess for dealers now, they have to really do their due diligence and not necessarily accept at face value that, that one solution is going to be perfect for their needs. Some of them have other needs to manage, their own inventory, lot management, that sort of stuff. So there's other tools
Yeah.
associated with the vehicle recovery that are sort of part of that ecosystem that might make sense for them. But right now, you can't just take the lead of your insurance company necessarily, because it sounds like they're not necessarily doing the most due diligence themselves on these new entrants, right? New technology.
No, and there's another layer to this too, which they haven't really scratched the surface with, and that's the protection of personal data, because some of the systems that are coming up from the US or from Europe also are considered to be tracking devices, which means that they're on 24/7. They're constantly pinging back and forth and sharing data with the recovery network, which is fine for that purpose, but it also touches on another stream, which is my data safe? Who's managing my data? Where is that data being stored? So every time you touch a component of this, it does lead to another series of fairly complex problems, because people don't want to be tracked. They don't want to be followed, so to speak. And then and that begs the question, if the location company can follow them, or do the thieves have the technology to be able to follow them? The latest trick also is to use a tracking device placed on a vehicle at a shopping center, and then they follow that vehicle home using that tracking device. So it's actually, the technology is actually being used against law enforcement to help them find and steal vehicles that they want. There's a shopping list of
Well, Steve,
vehicles.
you're making me feel more encouraged. I felt that maybe we'd have this discussion at the end of it. We'd be able to solve the answer of which technology a dealer should use. I guess it's a stay tuned kind of thing, but it's a good update, because I think, obviously dealers are concerned about this, but they're in the business of selling cars and servicing cars. They're not knee deep in this world, every minute of the day, as the insurance companies and the providers such as yourself have been for a long time. So I appreciate your candor on this discussion. So.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate you asking the question, because it is complex, but I think dealers need to understand they have their own needs for their business to protect their image and the ability to stay in business and to ensure the assets that are on their property. And secondarily is that, they need to ask questions about the technology that's being involved. Are the police engaged with this technology? Is the likelihood of the vehicle being recovered high or low, or what are the connections? So I think just having a superficial solution to the problem without investigating it thoroughly until there is some form of standardization is probably in the best interest of dealers, is to ask enough questions. Talk to law enforcement, talk to the police departments, and talk to your insurance provider, especially your garage policy provider. They will help make an informed decisions in the best interest of the dealers, both pocketbook and protecting their assets.
Well, I look forward to seeing how this plays out, and certainly have confidence in the technology providers to be able to solve the solution and foil thieves. But I think without that cooperation of the police and the authorities and the political will, it was a lot of technology companies providing solutions no one was acting on. I think the biggest shift is in the public discourse, and kudos to groups like CAA and CMVA and the GAC as well for really pushing this on the agenda, and the insurance industry as well. Because I think it's got the attention at the national level, and I think that will trickle down to enforcing whichever solution dealers choose. There's someone on the far end that's going to be trying to recover the vehicle. So that's a
Absolutely.
positive.
100%. Yeah,
Okay.
and it's a very fluid situation. So every day there's a new development.
Well, I appreciate it. We'll maybe come back and circle back and talk
Yeah.
about this in the future. But thank you for sharing your thoughts today, Steve.
No, thank you. I'm looking forward to this being less of a problem for everyone, believe me.